lots of you getting in touch on the BBC licence fee as well, so we're going to share some of those. But why are we talking about this, Pete?
Well, because it's set to rise next year from £159 to just over £169 a year.
Yeah, it's less than expected, but there are harsh penalties, including the possibility of jail for those who don't pay their BBC licence fee. So we are asking today, is the BBC worth the money? And you have changed your mind on this in the past few days, haven't you?
I have. So before we hand over to you guys to get your opinion, we've got Matthew Stolden here and Esther Stanthorpe. But before we do that, I want to say, yes, 2 days ago I was like, it's a complete waste of money. It's ridiculous. There's the cost of living crisis, people having to pay. Then all of a sudden, I started looking at how much Sky costs per month and how much Netflix costs per month. And I thought, actually, BBC's not just one... It's not just news. Not just the news channel, There's documentaries, there's sports channels, there's all that. So actually, really, you're not paying that much compared to some of the others. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, guys? Matthew, how you doing? Are you all right?
Yeah, very good to see you guys. Good to be back.
To get your opinion.
You're back, Matthew.
Yeah, we both worked at the BBC, didn't we?
Yes.
But we have slightly different slants.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked there for 10 years. So I'm what you would call a staffer, which is a bit like a lifer in jail. And you get, if you're a staff at the BBC, it means you get the pension, you get all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of people that work at the BBC. I think the BBC is a bit like a child that's entitled to money. It's been getting all this free money, and now because it's always had free money, it wants to carry on having money. I think that it should be a choice. I mean, we're in a different world now. There's thousands of channels. You don't have to watch adverts if you don't want to. I don't really think the BBC can justify putting people in jail if they don't pay. I believe in choice. Would people choose to pay that? Well, I don't know what messages you've got coming in, but would you choose to pay £169 a year?
It does seem a lot of money, and one of the issues I have with it is that a single mum or a single dad living on a council estate, as far as I know, has to pay the same amount as someone living in a mansion. And somehow, perhaps that could change and evolve, because otherwise it's a sort of a regressive form of taxation. But there is so much good about the BBC. I think it's absolutely fine to love a station like this, really engage with it, enjoy the diversity of views, a bit of a punch-up from time to time. But having a national broadcaster that, when it comes to news, bends over... doesn't always get it right. They're human beings at the heart of all this, of course, but bends over backwards to try to be impartial. I think that's very valuable. And taken as a whole, it is a wonderful British institution that I think, surprisingly, a lot of people are very proud of.
I mean, you made a good point there about what you said about, you know, different people from... with different backgrounds and with different financial, abilities to be able to pay this. But that's the same with Sky, that's the same with Netflix. They don't tier that, it's all one. So there's a point to be made there that actually all subscriptions are the same for everyone.
But except you can't watch sort of terrestrial TV unless you do have a licence. And so I think it seems to me there is a degree of unfairness in that, but it does offer a huge amount. It is good value for money. It's a sort of what is it, a coffee a week or something? When you think of all the radio channels, all the TV channels, the most precious thing to me, and I'll shut up in a second. The most precious thing to me is to have a news service that we can really rely on. You know, you watch GB News and you have, as I said, a great diversity of views, and it's really good debate, and I love coming on. But when it comes to sort of the hardcore news programmes, you know, the 10 o'clock news or whatever, I think we have to have a national broadcaster that, as I say, its absolute focus is impartiality.
Yeah. Esther, what do you make of that? Because when I'm meeting people out and about on the street, I met two people in a restaurant this week who love GB News and said they don't watch BBC anymore because they love GB News so much they don't want to pay their BBC licence fee. But is that the issue then, that it's mandatory? It is a mandatory tax in a way.
I think it's good to plug GB News. Look. It's got to be a choice. Surely it's got to be a choice. And then in terms of impartiality, I'm not 100% sure the BBC is actually now good enough and competitive enough to be able to justify. Is it a choice? I think we need to give people the choice. Would you choose to pay for it? Because at the moment, if you don't pay, you get put in prison.
But except you don't. I was going to pick you up on that. Actually, I think last year or the year before, whenever it was, Not a single person went to jail, is my understanding. So, look, yes, it is in theory a criminal offence, I think, not to pay your licence fee, but do people get sent to jail? Not in reality.
I think it's a new era. It's a new time. We live in the world of AI. We live in the world of digital. Children don't even know what the BBC is these days. People have got tablets. People have got different platforms. Some people don't even bother watching television on a television. I know a lot of people that just watch stuff on iPads and computers. It's a new world out there. I don't think the BBC has caught up with it. I think the BBC is actually quite old-fashioned and it finds it very difficult to change. I think it needs to change.
I guess that there's the argument as well that if you don't pay your subscription to Netflix, you can't watch it. So I guess if you don't pay, you can't watch TV. I know it sounds harsh, but like you said, people have got all these other means of watching things. Now, you can... I know it's live streaming that you can't watch without the licence. So you have to have the licence to watch anything live. But anything that's, I think, on demand, you can't watch. But things like Netflix and all that, you can watch without the licence.
And you can listen to the radio, of course, can't you?
There are both sides.
Do you think that there needs to be a different model? I mean, you're talking there about modernisation.
Yeah.
Perhaps having something mandatory is an old-fashioned way of looking at things. Should we be looking at something like a Netflix or an Amazon, where you pay your $6.99 a month or whatever it is, and then you can opt in or opt out?
I think when it comes to drama and fact-ent, you know, entertainment shows, shiny floor shows like Strictly Come Dancing, although they're very, very popular, there is an argument that we shouldn't actually be forced to pay for that sort of stuff. We should be able to opt in, opt out. It's the news thing that I worry about. And of course, as I said earlier, people are human beings and people do have their biases and their unconscious biases. But I worked at the BBC for 9 years in news, and I can honestly say there were genuine, proper attempts to be impartial.
Do you know what? I do want to ask you to something. This is totally different, but it has happened this week and it is relevant. I hope we can show this picture. This is Mariam Moshiri. She is a BBC presenter. You may have seen this happen this week. She was messing around with her cameraman. She made a gesture, shall we say, towards the camera and her friend behind the camera. It was caught on camera. Now, the Conservative Party have taken a screenshot and used it to attack the Labour Party, saying, this is Labour when you ask for their plans to tackle illegal migration. Now, I want to ask you about this because, Matthew, I know you've got an opinion. Do you think that is a professional way for the Conservative Party to behave on Twitter?
If you take that image in isolation, it shows that this Conservative Party that has been in power for 13, nearly 14 years is simply unfit for running the country. I thought it was disgraceful. The question I ask is, can you imagine, any viewers watching today who are fans of Margaret Thatcher, and I wasn't, can you imagine Margaret Thatcher signing that off? There is a caveat, and that is that Labour have also been putting out some pretty dodgy attack ads. So it's not just the Tories. And what I would caution against both parties is that we don't want this to be the dirtiest general election campaign ever. I mean, it might make for good headlines, it might be quite fun on some level, but we want to have dignity and professionalism, that's the word you used, I think, in our politics.
I mean, it could be her way of just saying what she thinks of the BBC licence. I mean, I don't know, I'm just saying.
OK, I've got one point, that if you worked in TV, which you have, and I've worked in the BBC for 10 years, I've worked in fact-ents as well, you know that if you are anywhere around a camera or a microphone, don't do anything that you don't want to be caught on camera, because you
remember Gordon Brown? Do you remember Gordon Brown, when he called that woman who was raising questions about immigration a bigoted old woman, or whatever he said in 2010, because the microphone was still on? That was a disaster. That might have lost Labour that election.
Happened with the Bee Gees as well, don't forget.
It happened with the Queen. She said that disgusting little man.
It does happen. I did feel for her in that moment. Do let us know what you make of the Tory party using that image on Twitter. Do you think it was just a laugh, or do you think it wasn't very professional? Do let us know. GBViews@GB